Hello and welcome to our event. Are you giving your IBM I systems the protection they need? Today's webinar is sponsored by Precisely and produced by Actual Tech Media. My name is Scott Becker. I'm from Actual Tech Media, and I'm excited to be your moderator for this special event. Now, before we get to today's great content, we do have a few housekeeping items that will help you get the most out of this session. First off, we want this to be an informative event for you, so we encourage any questions in the questions box in your webinar control panel. Not only will we have team members responding to questions during the live event, but we'll also have a dedicated Q&A session at the end of the presentation where we'll discuss in greater detail some of the top questions that you ask. The Q&A panel is also the place to let us know about any technical issues that you might be experiencing. A browser refresh will fix most audio, video, or slide advancement issues, but if that doesn't work, just let us know there in the Q&A and we'll provide further technical assistance. Second, in the handout section of your webinar control panel, you'll find that we're offering several resources. I'd especially like to call your attention to a link for getting started with Precisely. We also have a link to the Gorilla Guide Book Club where you can get access to Actual Tech Media's great printed resources on technology topics, as well as a link to the ATM Event Center, which has our calendar of upcoming events like this one. So I encourage you to access those resources now and share them with your friends and colleagues. Third, at the end of this webinar event, we'll be awarding a $250 Amazon gift card to one lucky registrant. Of course, you must be in attendance during the live event to qualify for the prize. The official terms and conditions of today's prize drawing can be found in the handout section. Just scroll to the bottom there, and you'll find the prize terms and conditions link. Now, finally, one of the best benefits of this event is the opportunity to ask a question of our expert presenters. And to help encourage your questions, we have a special additional prize for you. That's another Amazon gift card, this one for $50 for the best question. And after the event is over, we'll look at all the questions that came in, pick out the very best one, and contact that prize winner. And with that, let's get to today's main event. So it's my pleasure to introduce you to our presenter today. We have Bill Hammond, who's Director of Product Marketing at Precisely. Bill, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. And thanks to all of you out there who took some time out of your day to join us for our webcast today. Much appreciated. So our topic today is giving IBM I systems the protection they need. And really this discussion kind of elevates some of the conversations we have around sometimes worrying about just the availability or security, and really taking a more holistic sort of approach around this IBM I system that we're all, so tied to and frankly really love, giving it the care and feeding and again protection that it really needs. So what I want to talk today a little bit about, just lead off with kind of a state of the marketplace course, sort of a discussion on where we are today in the IBM I marketplace and why protecting this system is so critical. And then I want to talk about the different dimensions that are out there about that relate to protecting that IBM I. We're going to talk about availability issues and security issues, monitoring, services engagements, things like that. And then at the end, I want to close a little bit with giving you some specific areas where Precisely can help be your partner in keeping your IBM I system as protected and viable as possible. So that's kind of the flow of what we want to go through today. So as I said, let me start by talking a little bit. There's a lot of different areas we could touch on, and what I want to really address today is why is the IBM I so popular? And I think there's a couple of different reasons, and some of the stats and market surveys I'm going to show you in a minute are going to bear this out. But people choose this platform because of the incredible reliability that it has, the power and efficiency that it brings over other platform choices that you might need, the security that is, and we always talk about, the IBM I being a very securable platform, and it is. So there's some maybe misconceptions out there that it's secure just by the default, but the reality is it's a very securable platform, and because of the nature of the critical applications and the data that live on the IBM I, that security is no small issue. So those are kind of the areas where IBM I excels and why people choose it. So when we really talk about power systems that running that IBM I operating system, it's been something people have been using now for over 40 years, 35 to 40 years, really, in different iterations. We've all called it different things over those years, and I won't belabor what the different names have been, but what we call today the IBM, it's been out there a long time. And in order to do that, it's really had to continue to adapt as the landscape changed, as computing needs changed, as the users changed, as the overall IT landscape has changed. It's had to adapt. But through that whole thing, it's always been, at its core, a system that people use to run mission-critical workloads. And it was very strong in a lot of different verticals and things like that. Retail, distribution, logistics, financial services, certainly. So there's a lot of areas that have deep penetration of the IBM I and have had that system in their IT environments for a very, very long time. So that's kind of the system itself. But let's talk about the people that use it. The community that's out there on IBM I is sort of unparalleled. There's a tremendous, passionate, involved user community. I'm sure a lot of you were recently at the Common event that was just held in Denver, and that is a bringing together of that IBM I community, and very supportive of the platform, and learning about it and everything else. The size of the community, it's about 150,000 customers is what IBM talks about. Most of those companies don't have huge IBM I staffs. The amount of computing power that runs here versus the number of people that it takes to keep it running actually is a very positive ratio for a lot of IT environments. And 73% of the companies out there have less than 3 people that are really dedicated administrators for the IBM I system itself. So it actually can run with a minimum of care and feeding. And there was one survey that I saw that 94% of the people responding to the survey believe that the IBM I is a better choice, that it delivers more ROI than some of the competing platforms or some of the alternative platforms. That's a pretty high percentage of people that believe in this platform. So it's got a very strong user community that supports this platform. And I think that's an important reason that we need to consider, are we giving that IBM I everything it needs for its care and feeding, if you will. But there are a couple of trends that are impacting the marketplace now. There's some that have been going on a while, some that are relatively new. We do continue to see IBM I more, people evaluating moving IBM I workloads to an IBM I environment in the cloud, whether that's public or private. So cloud deployment is a conversation that's been around for quite a few years, but we are starting to see it really be implemented. We're seeing more and more people actually stop talking about that move to the cloud and actually doing it. And that's one of the areas that we see impacting the marketplace right now. We do continue to see, and this is really important for the overall health and viability of the system, that customers continue to upgrade and move to the newer iOS versions. Also, they continue to upgrade hardware. Frankly, not maybe as frequently as in years past, but that migration from one generation of the power processor to another keeps marching on, and customers continue to stay current in their IBM I environments. We have seen customers start to add more partitions to their environments. Used to be people that had multiple partitions was maybe the rarity. That's quite a while ago. But we continue to see more than 50% of the companies don't just have one partition, but have more than 3. So that's a continued growth. Another trend, and this is a little more recent, and certainly was driven, put on steroids, if you will, by the pandemic, was remote work and remote access to the IBM I system, access to the applications that run on that system, and being able to secure and worry about all the different vulnerabilities that start to happen when people are not just accessing your IBM I from inside your firewalls, but actually from remote locations and things like that. And the other thing that is a continued challenge, and it comes across in a lot of these surveys, is the security knowledge and skills gap that people feel in the IBM I platform, of not having the security knowledge that they need, maybe not the security expertise on the team. Sometimes the security center of gravity for a lot of companies is outside the IBM I, more in a centralized security office. So making sure that the IBM I is protected from a security standpoint can be challenging for customers as well in today's world. And that kind of takes us to the fourth box here. Almost every survey you'll see, and I'll touch on this in a minute here, talks about security being the top priority for people. So it's very visible. Security is something that they're very, very concerned about. And then right behind that is keeping the system available. It runs mission-critical applications. Users are accessing those applications all the time. If you're a retail environment, people are doing checkouts and all those kinds of things on it. Financial services have tons of transactions running to it. So the IBMI continues its place as a transaction-heavy sort of focus, and so keeping that system available is very, very critical for these companies. Another challenge that's happening is getting the required skills on the staff. It's harder and harder to find IBMI skilled people. There's not as many people that are knowledgeable at this platform as other platforms that are out there. So that skills challenge remains a real issue for a lot of companies. In fact, I just saw yesterday IBM announced a program to help educate people on the IBMI platform to kind of help address this skills gap for people. But it is a real issue right now, and it does exist out there for people that they have to deal with it today. Another thing that is really, and I think these are kind of related, these last two bullets here, that automation and modernization are really top of mind for a lot of customers as well. And, the automation makes sense. If I've got a challenge with, finding IBMI skills, what can I automate? What can I take off the plate of, a manual process and actually automate that process, or apply some, AI to it so that I don't need as much human interaction with it. It's a challenge, and it's hard to do, but it's a big payoff if you can find ways to automate your IBMI environment and modernize it as well as new applications and things are moved into there, or you're upgrading, as I said. So automation and modernization are definitely concerns that people like to focus on. So, there's a lot of IBMI marketplace surveys that are done. Some of them, frankly, are done by our competitors. Some are done by IBM. Some are done by analyst firms. But, some commonality when you look at all those comes across. And I think I mentioned this on the prior slide. But, security consistently, and I'd say this is not a this year dynamic. This is something that's been consistent for the last 3 to 5 years. That security is the number one issue on this platform. I'm not sure that's different than a lot of other platforms, but just to make sure we're all aware that security is top of mind for IT, and as they're looking at priorities and what they need to invest in. Availability then follows as the second or third choice. Usually it's cited by more than half of the respondents as something that is one of their top concerns. Kind of a, I don't know if you want to call it folklore that's out there. And this happens honestly in the IBM mainframe space as well. This idea that, these platforms are old, so they're going away. You hear words like legacy, and it feels like, okay, so people are looking to get off these platforms. And there are indeed companies, and there are projects to move some workloads maybe off of the IBMI, or, as I mentioned, the mainframe. But when you actually look at the IBMI user base and ask them this question, only 5% is the number that seems to come around of IBMI users that have an intention to remove everything off their IBMI and get all those applications running somewhere else. That's a pretty low percentage of people that are looking to completely eliminate the IBMI. People may be evaluating one workload or another, or maybe they're moving something to a different platform. But as far as we're going to get off the IBMI and we're stating that as a direction, that's a fairly small percentage of people. So IBMI is going to be around for a while. This is not a dynamic that's unique to the IBMI environment, but this dollar figure sort of is. The average of cost of downtime is $125,000 per event. That's a significant issue. So availability is an investment that you can make and fairly easy to justify from an ROI standpoint when you really understand your true cost of downtime. And we'll get into how to look at some of that as we go. I mentioned earlier that the remote access issue and remote operations have become a real concern for people, primarily in the security angle of those people accessing the system from somewhere outside of the corporate environment. And then the other one I think is really important when you look at what kind of applications are running on the IBMI, when you look at these surveys, 70% of the respondents are saying that the IBM I, in these companies that do use the IBM I, that 70% of those people are saying it runs more than half of their core business applications. So in places where IBM I is being used, it's a very, very important platform that needs, as I said, the right care and feeding and making sure that you're giving it the protection it needs across a bunch of different dimensions. It's not a single approach that's going to solve it. You need to be looking across a number of dimensions, and that's really what we're going to be talking about today. So I think a lot of you out there are familiar with IT Jungle. It's one of the preeminent publications that speaks to this marketplace, the IBM I marketplace specifically. And it's been around for a long time, and it's one of the loudest voices in the industry. When they talk about marketplace predictions in their latest IBM I predictions articles they ran, there were a couple of different areas that they really highlighted. Automation, they called out, as I said on the earlier slide, is something that really is going to be important in the IBM I marketplace. That modernization, we're starting to look at, should we be running some of this workload in the cloud? Is that a better solution? Is it better for us from a flexibility standpoint to be able to spin up workloads or capacity and tear it down on an as-needed basis? Spending is something that continues in this current marketplace to be more and more of a focused effort. I think it's very common right now for companies to be looking at their spending very, very closely. We're coming out of a period where there was a lot of spending and expansion, and there was a lot of optimism about we're going to be growing, and I think that optimism still exists in a long-term basis, but I think there's a short-term spending focus right now for people to optimize costs. How are they going to weather what is maybe not a downturn as much as maybe a slowing of the marketplace? So spending is a big issue for people, and it's going to drive decisions in the marketplace. And then finally, and this touched in some of these other areas of automation and modernization, but this move to the cloud is really real. The marketplace prediction from IT Jungle talked about 2023 really being a year where customers are finally stopping talking about the cloud and actually making that movement. And we are seeing people and companies that actually take that approach as well. We recently did a webinar with IBM Power VS, and they talked about how they're seeing the IBM I system and this move to the cloud. And this is their slide essentially, but it talks about it's not, people aren't forklifting their entire IBM I infrastructure and moving into the cloud in most cases. In a lot of cases, it's a hybrid sort of multi-cloud environment. Some workloads are going to be on-prem, some will be in the cloud, and that's really what we're looking at as far as what the model is going to look like. It's not a wholesale, nobody's going to run IBM I on-premise anymore. They're going to run it in the cloud. It's going to be a hybrid model that takes effect, and it's then going to be up to individual customers looking at individual workloads and deciding what's best for those. And you can see the different things that become concerns, like how do I move between clouds? How do I get the data back and forth? How do I make sure the connectivity is there, security is there, and just management challenges around hybrid cloud environments. And maybe I have to spread between on-premise, public clouds, and private clouds. That's a challenge as well, just in the consistency aspect of managing all that stuff. So again, the cloud movement is real. It's really impacting the market, and it does bring up some of these concerns about how do you want to give that IBM I system all the protection and really support that it needs. So as we go through the rest of this, I really want to kind of break things into a couple of different categories. We're going to talk about availability of that system. We're going to talk about the security of that system, some of the factors that you want to be evaluating in both of those categories. One thing I want to make sure that, and we haven't talked about this maybe from Precisely standpoint as much as we could have, is the monitoring of those systems. You can do all these things great, but if you're not looking at what's going on, you're leaving yourself vulnerable. So monitoring and real-time monitoring is a critical element, and Precisely can help with that as well. And then finally, I wanted to talk a little bit about services. Partnering with a company that has the ability to deliver professional services or even managed services can be really important in an environment where IBM I talent is hard to find. And sometimes it's a short-term need, sometimes it's a longer-term need. But services felt like it was one of these four pillars of protecting the IBM I that we really needed to focus on. So with those four kind of pillars there in place, as I said, let's talk first about availability and business resiliency. So what really drives people to invest in availability solutions, really in the IBM space or broadly outside of it as well? But almost always the initial or the biggest driver is the financial impact of downtime. People know how painful downtime could be. They may not be able to put a specific dollar figure on it for them. I've got a slide next that we'll talk about that kind of gives you some elements of that. But that financial impact is important. And then you have things like compliance, where you have to keep your systems up from a compliance standpoint for a certain period of time. Being able to meet service level agreements with internal and with your external business partners, so the systems need to be available. 24/7 access. There just isn't time for planned downtime the way it used to be in the past. So keeping an availability solution where you can be running virtually 24/7 all the time is critical as well. As the server power gets bigger, more applications can run on a single server, and that's great, and it's got a lot of efficiencies, but it does concentrate your vulnerabilities. So keeping that physical system and those applications up and running become more challenging because you're consolidating those resources on fewer servers. So you got to make sure that the ones that you do have running are up and available. So a lot of reasons to drive people to looking at their availability and looking beyond, say, once a day tape backup or even, some kind of snapshotting thing to a real full availability solution where you're replicating data in real time. You're providing a failover mechanism that can keep your system available, your applications and your data available, within minutes or seconds of downtime. So that downtime cost thing that we talked about, this is a slide that we've talked to for actually quite a bit of time here at Precisely, but it's still very, very valid. A lot of people think of their cost of downtime, and they've got a fairly narrow view of what that really is. And a lot of times it's when my systems are down, I generate this much revenue, so that's my cost of downtime. But you forget all the other costs that are sort of surrounding this that are, it could be really big in your particular environment or for your company. Your reputation can be damaged. We see, people in the news all the time of system outages, and that gets press, and that's a bad thing for you. During the time your systems are down, you have lost productivity. You have workers that are not able to do their job. So outside of the direct revenue loss that you might have because your e-commerce site goes down, what about the salaries you continue to pay, and those workers can't really do their job, things like that. Other expenses to recover from a more manual approach to your availability, having temporary employees come on, running additional equipment because you don't have a backup server, things like that can be very, very expensive. The revenue loss here, we directly, talk about, or I talked about that, it's direct revenue loss. People kind of get that. But when you factor in some of these other things, particularly the damaged reputation, you could be, future revenue that you're not gaining. Somebody buys from you on a regular basis, but they run into a downtime thing and it caused them pain, so they started evaluating your competitors, things like that. And then finally, financial performance in terms of, meeting return on investment goals and things could even impact your stock price if you're a public company because you've had one of these publicized downtime events, and it can actually hit your financial performance negatively. So there's a lot of other ancillary downtime costs that you really do need to be considering. So availability, again, very critical for your IBM system. And as we start to move into a world where you're in this hybrid cloud or cloud environment, make sure as you're thinking about this, your HA and your security products, frankly, but your HA products in particular, need to be cloud ready. They need to be engineered and architected for a cloud environment. They need to be licensed for a cloud environment and all those kind of things. And remember that as you're moving to a cloud environment, you're not going to generally have access to things like tape drives to do data migration and things like that. So cloud does impact your availability, and when you're moving to the cloud, that can be a big availability challenge to keep your systems up and running while you do that move. So consider that as part of the cost of doing business with availability on your IBM. Then if we move to the other pillar here on security, obviously top of mind for people, but one of the things that we always like to point out is, it's not like this is getting better. Security is becoming more challenging, not less. Every time the good guy, if you will, finds a way to be more secure or plug a hole or adapt to a threat, a new threat emerges. So it continues to just be a challenge, and it doesn't look like it's got any hopes of stopping soon. And these threats just continue on. I mean, you can see a lot of the numbers here where they're increasing, but the biggest take home from this slide really that I want to talk to you about is just that idea that you can't put your head in the sand about security. You have to be thinking about it. You have to be thinking about it constantly because things are changing. Security is not a thing that you achieve. It's sort of a state of mind, and it needs to be embedded in everything you do in your IBMI platform, as should have a security element. Even your HA solution should have a security element of thinking about how is my availability going to impact my security vulnerabilities. So aside from the cost and all the ongoing challenges and all the bad actors that are out there making things worse, it's tough to secure, as I mentioned a couple of times, this new distributed workforce. We have people accessing systems from their own devices. Not to mention the Internet of Things devices that are out there. So there's a lot of different ways, and some of them don't have really good protections in terms of security. So letting those kind of, cell phones, things like that, access your IBMI system is something that can be very, very important from a productivity standpoint. But to be honest, you also need to consider the security aspects of that and decide whether you can adequately secure those devices to be able to do that, whether it's through multi-factor authentication or other access control capabilities that you have. Cloud investment also highlights your vulnerability. 45% of breaches that happen in cloud environments. So it's reaching half of the security issues that are happening in cloud environments at the same time that certainly in the IBMI space, almost half of the environment doesn't live in the cloud yet. A lot of it's moving to the cloud, but we haven't reached the 50-50 sort of balance yet. So there's an inordinate amount of security concerns that happen in the cloud, and you need to be thinking about how to manage that security risk as part of your cloud operations strategy as well. I mentioned earlier just quickly about the idea that sometimes security isn't an IBMI-focused organization within your company. Some companies do that. They have a platform-by-platform approach to security, but it's becoming more common that there is more of a security operations desk or security operations center where all platforms are considered and policies are implemented at a higher level than a platform-by-platform level. And so the IBMI needs to be secured and meet those policies and procedures that are being outlined by the security operations staff, just like all the other platforms. And they're the ones that are requiring things like automation and documentation and monitoring and those kind of things. So as security operations and centralizing security operations becomes an important element, you're also looking at the need to make sure your IBMI can meet those requirements and partnering with vendors where appropriate that can help you with that centralized challenge. And then the final thing I wanted to call out here on this is actually particularly an article that Forbes had pulled together, ransomware. That continues to be the most visible, certainly, threat out there. And ransomware is just one type of malware. There's tons of malware out there in general, but ransomware is the most notable one right now. It's the one that gets the most press. It's where systems are taken control of by bad actors, and then they want you to pay them money for remediating or for getting the keys to the kingdom back and be able to unlock that data that they have locked down. That's why the name ransomware comes in there. There's really no single thing you do to prevent ransomware. We certainly have been sending the message out there that they feel like it's a multi-level, multi-threaded sort of approach to protecting yourself from ransomware. It's access control, it's monitoring, it's a number of different things that all have to be working together for that ransomware threat to be adequately protected against. And honestly, you can do everything perfectly and people are still vulnerable. So I don't mean to imply there's some magic set of things that you apply, but you can always lock down your system better and more effectively and more securely, and you want to keep driving toward that. And we always want to highlight the message that we have, which is preventing ransomware is the game. It's not about recovering from ransomware better or how you deal with these ransomware attacks once they're on your system. The real focus should be prevent them from happening in the first place. That's where the real value is in the bang for the buck, is prevention, not in remediation. So we talked about availability and security. Let me talk about what may be a newer topic for some of the people out there, is really reporting and monitoring around all this activity and all these things that you're doing. When we talk about some of the definitions, when you're monitoring for security, there's a very well-established set of tools that are out there that people use, SIM solutions or SIEM solutions, however you pronounce that. But it stands for Security and Information Event Management, generally characterized by real-time monitoring of all the events that are going on. And trust me, as we probably all know, the IBMI tracks things very, very granularly. Our journals contain tons of information, and that's the kind of data that you can look at from the security standpoint to find out what's going on, set up alerts, make sure the right people get notified when something happens, or when you're out of compliance, or you got an audit challenge or whatever. You've got the data that you can then use for those things. So security and information management in the IBMI space really is getting that journal data into one of those tools that help you manage and monitor the security and all the things going on around it. Another element of this monitoring and reporting really breaks into two different areas. It's kind of IT operations monitoring, but you really do it for two reasons. One is IT operations analytics, and this is where you're collecting the data from a number of different sources on the IBMI. You're getting it from multiple journals, but you're also bringing the data into an environment where you're looking at not just one platform, not just looking at the IBMI data, but you're looking at the IBMI data in the context of all the other systems that are out there. Because let's face it, even though IBMI is a very powerful system, it interfaces with a lot of the other parts of the IT organization. Interfaces with other databases, interfaces with data sources, it interfaces with web applications and web access applications, things like that. So in order to really look at what's going on in your environment and analyze it, you need to have an environment where you can look at not just one platform at a time. You need to be able to look at the interactions between the systems and all the data that's flowing between those systems and what's going on. And then operations management, and it's similar to analytics, but it's less about analyzing the environment, really looking at performance data and capacity and provisioning and just the overall health of the environment. So when we look at monitoring and reporting, we're generally trying to drive to one of these three or all three solutions. A SIM solution focused around security, or some of the IT operations capability, whether it's monitoring or management, or whether it's the analytics piece of that, where you're looking at it from a cross-platform standpoint. The challenge with a lot of those platforms that do this, a lot of the SIEM solutions and just those general operational analytic platforms that people use, those are systems that are there on the right. ServiceNow, you might have heard of. Splunk is a big name here. There's a lot. Splunk, Elastic, Kafka, a number of these, and this is not a whole, the comprehensive list. It's just to give you an idea of the kind of platforms I'm talking about. And you can see in the middle of it here, all the different data that flows into those platforms in order for them to provide that analytics capability. Really important. The problem is there's sort of a brick wall for virtually all of those systems between the IBM I system and its journal data and what they bring into these systems. So by default, or out of the box, those analytics systems that people are using can't really support the native IBMI data. So you need to have a solution that can actually get your IBMI data in a format and in a way that you can use it or see it and analyze it along with all those other applications or other platforms and data from them. And we have a solution for that. We'll talk about it in just a minute. But understand that as great as all those analytic platforms are, most of them can't address mainframe and or IBMI data natively, and they need kind of a helper application, and that's what we can provide. So again, a little bit more on the operations analytics side of things. So this is that particularly important that it's real-time analytics here, so that you can tell what's going on, you can make decisions, you can react in real time, you can actually, hopefully because of that quick reaction time and the ability to be more nimble and responsive, you can avoid problems. You can avoid things in areas like availability or security breaches and things like that. So the operations analytics is a big big push for a lot of companies as they're trying to get more efficient and better, and it's a big thing in the IBMI space as well. Security monitoring, that is just simply taking what we know, the journal logs, the journals from the IBMI that are security-related data, and get that into a tool, the SIM solutions I mentioned earlier, so that your IBMI data is being seen, analyzed, and evaluated, just like all the other security data for the environment, network activity and other systems and things like that, and being able to create alerts for things that you're concerned about. Somebody trying to log in with the same ID and just try 20 passwords in 5 minutes. That's something you want to know about, and you can set up alerts for those kind of things in your environment as well. So where can Precisely help you with all these different dimensions? I sort of teased it a little bit as we went through those, but I just want to spend a few minutes here as we wrap up to kind of give you a sense of where we can help you with all these different areas of being able to protect your IBMI in a way that it really deserves. And, Precisely has been doing this for quite a while. We've been in the IBMI space with our availability products, our services, our security. We have tons of people on our staff that have been in the IBMI world for really that whole 35 or 40 years that it's been out there. So it's really important that when you're looking at how to solve some of these problems or address some of these problems or mitigate some of these issues, you're working with somebody that has that kind of expertise that you can rely on. Not only product expertise, but also services expertise in case you need that. So when we look at our high availability offerings that we have, you guys may be familiar with these brand names, Mimix, QuickEDD, and Itera. All of them share a lot of characteristics. Some are more targeted maybe in SMB environments, so the Itera product versus Mimix and QuickEDD are a little more scalable in terms of what they can handle in terms of volume. But really, all of them are all about eliminating downtime by having a secondary system available if you need it to do maintenance or to fail over in case of an outage or things like that. Make sure that you don't have a lot of data loss, that if you do have an outage, your real-time replication means that you haven't lost any transactions or any data. They all have high levels of automation. We talked about the importance of automation as the IBMI continues to evolve, so automation is a really critical piece. And then be able to be deployed flexibly. Maybe you want part of it in the cloud. Maybe you want all of your environment on-prem. Maybe you want it all in the cloud. Being able to do those kind of deployment options. Being able to have an environment that's got multiple nodes, where it's got two backup or a system and a backup in my data center, and then I've got another one off-site in the event of a disaster, a local disaster, things like that. Those are really critical to your HA solution. So as you're looking at solving your availability problem, please, we've got expertise in this area, and we can certainly help you work through some of those challenges. One of the areas that's kind of unique to Precisely in our HA solutions here is the new thing we've announced. It's called Mimix Health Link. And essentially, if you remember my conversation just a few moments ago about monitoring your environment for security and IT operations, think about this as a corollary where we're monitoring your HA environment and then being able to send that HA-related, that availability-related data to those analytic platforms that you can see there on the right. So essentially, we're using some of the plumbing, frankly, of our IronStream product, which we'll talk about in a minute, but it brings that ability to manage particularly the large, diverse environments, or in a managed service environment, being able to use the Mimix Health Link to monitor and manage multiple Mimix installations in a kind of single pane of glass sort of approach. So that's a unique capability that we have on our availability stack as well. When we talk about our security offerings, we kind of divide things into a number of different products that make this up, but they all fall into either access control, monitoring and reporting, data privacy, and the malware prevention that I kind of spoke to explicitly on a slide a few minutes ago. But what they're all really focused around, all of these tools deployed together or separately, trying to prevent breaches from happening in the first place, automation, so you're not having somebody sit there and stare at the screen wondering what's going on, being alerted when the anomalies happen is really important. Protecting the privacy of data, and that's both from a compliance standpoint and just from a business practice standpoint, and then that defense against today's malware attacks, which are evolving all the time, ransomware, those things. Prevention, not remediation. Let's stop them from happening in the first place. All of our Assure security focused on the IBM platform. We've had a number of technological enhancements that we've added to these products. We've acquired a lot of products in the marketplace and consolidated them into our Assure security portfolio. So we do have a lot of expertise in this area. Generally, the differentiators for us with security are, being able to control the IBM access points and understanding how exit points and all that kind of stuff works. Our third-party support, NIST support for our encryption capabilities. We work with Townsend's Key Manager, which is one of the most popular ones out there with our encryption. Our multi-factor authentication, being able to adapt. Remember I talked about security operations centers being sort of the way it was trending? So when a company sets up its multi-factor authentication approach, it isn't setting it up platform by platform. It's looking for a set of capabilities, and a flexible MFA tool is important so that the IBMI can live inside of that higher level edict that comes down from the Security and Operations Center. Being able to integrate with all those SIM solutions that I talked about to get that security data off of the IBMI platform and into the SIM solution. QRadar is one that I didn't mention on those other slides, but it's an important one in the IBMI space. So I mentioned it here. And just, the overall monitoring and things that we provide with the dashboard with our security products. This is fundamentally the challenge I spoke to on the previous slide about the monitoring of getting that data off of the legacy IBM system into these more modern analytic platforms where people are looking at the data. And our product that can help you with that is called IronStream. And we've got IronStream for all these different platforms. I call out ServiceNow and Splunk because they are honestly the two biggest ones right now that we're in the marketplace with. But all these other ones, Kafka, Elastic, we've got some new platforms coming in the short term. But what does IronStream really provide? Fundamentally, the value proposition is very simple. It is the ability to get the important data, whether it's security data or operational data, off of the IBMI, out of those journals, and send it to those operational platforms in a format that they can digest and in a format that they can look at alongside all the other systems, and the ability to filter that data. Because as we probably all know, journals track tons of stuff, and maybe not everything that's in the journal needs to be brought into that analytics system. So the ability to call that data down or filter that data is really important, and IronStream gives you the ability to do that as well. And then finally, I didn't want to stop this conversation without talking a little bit about the importance potentially of professional services as it's harder to find IT staff, as your challenges rise in this complex new environment, and some of these new things, maybe like using an IronStream to get your data off of the IBMI into these platforms. As those challenges arise for you, it can be very helpful to have a partner that knows how to work through these issues, has done it before for hundreds of companies, and can help out on a basis of, a small project or an ongoing project that includes training of your people and everything else. We've got a very flexible set of professional services around both our HA and our security. We also have a unique set of what we call our while active services. So like if you've got to migrate to the cloud, we've got a migrate while active service that will let you do that cloud movement of that application or that workload into the cloud without suffering any downtime on your current on-prem environment. You get everything moved to the cloud, use our replication to keep things in sync, and then you have a very short cutover period. You can take a migration that might take system downtime to a matter of days or potentially weeks down to minutes. So it can be a very, very important way of just being efficient and being safe, being able to test that environment before you actually do the cutover and not have to fail back to the old on-prem environment. And we can also do that for encryption and database promotion and things like that as well. So the while active services are a very important piece for us as well. And then we have the managed services offering as well. Some of our customers have gotten to the point where they just want us to manage their HA or, in some cases, their security for them. They'll use our tools, but we actually run that environment for them. And they dedicate no staff to it, and they're then able to free up that staff to go do other things and precisely can be the managed service provider for them with running these things. So we can help you from small, one-off sort of engagements to a more regular, sort of larger, implementation engagement or training engagement or things like that, all the way up to including completely handling the managed service side of things as well. And I wanted to leave you with one final example of how this can really come into play. There was a bank over in the UK that was doing one of these migrations from one platform to a new platform, and had an issue, and it did not go well. And they ended up being fined by the European Regulatory Agency almost £50 million because they had failed to essentially do the right due diligence. And they were called out for, like, look, you should have seen these things coming. You should have, normal risk analysis should have exposed these things to you. You didn't manage those risks well at all. So that accounts for the fairly heavy fine which was levied against them. And you can see the quote from the executive director of the enforcement agency. So not taking care of things like migrations when you're moving to the cloud and not being able to take advantage of like a third-party partner like us to help you with those things can have real consequences. Just as sort of a final aside on this slide too, the report on this actually called out the fine would have been higher if that the bank, TSB, had not been so cooperative once the problem was identified and they realized they were in a world of trouble. They worked very closely with a new third party and with the regulation board to get this fixed for their customers, because what it did was lock customers out of the banking applications. And it was something that's where the fine came from. But there was quite a bit of mitigation in terms of the amount of fine that they would have gotten levied, because they did, after the fact, work very, very closely and were very cooperative with getting this thing straightened out. So, again, real world example of how important some of this stuff is to take into account as you're looking at your IBM environment and protecting that IBM environment. So, final thought, I just want to leave you with, we do have ways that we can help you with all these challenges. We want to, drive home the message that the IBM is something you really do need to be considering as a critical platform, and give it the care and feeding and expertise and protection that it needs. And Precisely can give you a level of experience that we feel like is unique in the marketplace, both the experience and the technical knowledge that we have, the different product selections that you can bring to the fore. And then, our sales team can help you identify where we can help you. So work with them to understand how those challenges maybe could be mitigated by working with us. So hopefully this conversation today gave you some new things to think about, maybe some new solutions to potentially evaluate. But at the end of the day, I just wanted to really highlight for everybody the importance of your IBM systems and making sure that you aren't forgetting about the fact that these systems are really, really critical, and you're giving them the protection that they do need. So now I can move on to see if we had any questions come in while I was talking. Thanks again for all your time and attention so far. Let me get to my questions here. Okay, we did have a couple come in here. Let me see if I can address these. Does Precisely work with any public cloud providers? Short answer is yes. We do work with public cloud providers, but frankly, we work with private cloud. We have a number of our business partners that have established, their own hosting and cloud environments, and private cloud and hybrid cloud environments for people. So we absolutely work with them. We don't have a unique relationship or a special relationship with anyone. We've engineered our product and our capabilities really around helping out wherever people choose to run their data. And there's public clouds from IBM and Google and AWS and a bunch of different IBM public cloud options, as well as this business partner options that are out there. And we work equally well with all of them. And pretty much, worked with all of them at some case multiple times. This is a question on the IronStream product. Where does the IronStream product run? On the IBM I? Good question. Parts of it do run. There's like an agent sort of an architecture that runs on the IBM I itself. Very low overhead. It doesn't create a ton of performance degradation or anything on the system. And then what it does is get the data that we tell it to, from those journals, and sends it to IronStream Hub, it's called, where that filtering can take place if it needs to. And that mid-tier server, if you want to call it that, isn't on the IBM. It runs on a Linux or a Windows environment, and where some of that filtering and data manipulation is done. And then from there, it's forwarded on into the ServiceNow or Splunk or whatever environment where it is accepted based on their ingestion process. So pieces of it do run on the IBM, but it's a very small piece of it. And then the magic happens in the IronStream Hub, and then moving it into this other platform. So it does have pieces of it running on the IBM, but it's not an application you need to really worry about overall performance hit or something on your IBM. Okay, so another one here. If I'm an existing Mimix customer, do I get charged to use that HealthLink app? No, actually you don't. It is a free capability of our Mimix product. It's going to be expanded to all of our HA offerings at some point, but the HealthLink product right now is simply a capability that you can turn on, and it will give you that ability, very much like we've described with the IronStream, to pick what journal data you want and have it sent from the IBMI, the journals in the IBMI, into whatever analytic tool that you're using, whether it's Splunk or ServiceNow, depending on the type of data that you have. So the HealthLink itself is something that is a no-charge capability for you if you want to use it. It does require some setup, and you got to make sure that you've got data connections and things all connected. But again, we can help you with that. We've got customers using it, and we can walk you through that process. But it's not an additional charge for the software in that case. It's just an additional feature of Mimix that we've recently announced. All right, well, that looks like we got most of the questions here taken care of. I'll go ahead and close now, and by saying, appreciate your time today. I know everybody's busy and taking your time out for something like this. We do appreciate it and recognize it, and look forward to seeing you on future webcasts in the very near future. So thanks a lot. Have a good day.
Thank you, Bill. Great presentation. And now before we wrap up, we have one more piece of business. It's the Amazon gift card prize drawing. And the winner of the $250 Amazon gift card is Al Gauss from California. Congratulations to Al Gauss. We'll be in touch to get you your card. And with that, on behalf of the Actual Tech Media team, I want to thank Precisely for making this event possible. And thanks as always for attending and for your great questions. That concludes today's event. Have a great rest of your day, and we hope to see you next time.